Don't forget to hit record.
I just did. So ready when you are.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 1% Better Show. This is episode 57. And today, Kim and I are going to be talking about motivation, but motivation with a little bit of twist in regards to motivation while dealing with a pandemic. And of course, we'll talk motivation in general, but and it all applies. But as always, a little bit of context before we get into the episode. We are about a month into the coronavirus pandemic here in the United States. And our gym here has been online what is now in about 3 days going to be a month of online services. So we are not in the gym. Kim and I are doing this via Zoom, and the world looks very different right now. So we're going to talk motivation throughout all this chaos and see if we can help you with that. But as always, before doing so, Kim, how are you doing?
Yeah, hanging in there, right? I think the same as everybody else. We were kind of talking before we hit record about sleep. I was telling Doug I just haven't been sleeping especially well, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. Stress manifests itself in different ways, and so I'm just like, my sleep schedule feels like it's all messed up. And honestly, the thing that's bothering me most right now, though, is that I can't get a haircut. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you clipped yourself over the weekend and you shaved, but I'm like,
I did not do it myself.
Megan
took the buzzers to it.
She did a good job. But I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not. It's the process of growing out short. This is so vanity right here, but the process of growing out your hair is it's an ugly one, and there's a reason that I keep my hair short. So, but in the grand scheme of things, if I just have long shaggy hair and that's what happens, then that's not a bad thing. So, but
you got plenty of baseball hats to wear.
I do. It's true. I do. You know what I need is I need to get a Sperling one from the gym so that I'll be in dress code. But no, yeah, hanging in there. I think just like everybody else, and trying to continually to adjust to what I wrote for my email today was about struggling to have things to look forward to. Like trying to have a sense of like, okay, when are we going to take that vacation, and when is baseball going to come back, and and when are we going to be able to go out to dinner again? And so anyway, so I think we're all kind of feeling that to a point in week 4, but yeah, so hanging in there. How about you? How are you?
Similar. I think if everybody I think we would all agree that we're all just kind of hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody's like crushing it right now. And if you are, I'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, I mean, generally speaking, I think, keeping a positive attitude and trying to find, the bright spots. And I did a check-in with the clients last night on how they're doing. And it was the clients at the gym, and it was awesome seeing some of their kind of, I guess, analogies, for lack of a better term. So things like, looking for the bright spots, and Sherry used a line like riding the waves,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was a nice little analogy for right now, like just riding with the waves, knowing that you're probably going to get, knocked over on that surfboard, but it can still be an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
But no, just trying to stay positive and balancing a very, well, balance might not be the right word, but navigating a very dense workload right now between things at the gym, and obviously the consulting right now is challenging to say the least, because everybody's usually in consulting, you generally have 3 buckets of people, and this is true for anything, but you have the bucket that's like in chaos and drowning, basically their business is drowning. You have kind of that middle tier. They're like, okay, they're mediocre. They're doing good,
Right.
but they need you to kind of stay afloat. And then you have the third group that you tell them to do something, they do it, and they're crushing it.
Right.
And right now, and so in a normal week, that you kind of can divvy up your attention. But right now, everybody's in that first bucket of crisis and drowning, and so it's been challenging, but I don't want to say fun, because fun might not be the right label, but it's been as much as I think everything right now is can be exhausting. It's also very energizing,
Right.
because you have, I think, in our industry specifically, but I could just say in general, you also right now have a big opportunity to help people, probably help people more than you even could have before,
Mhm.
whether that's because people are now willing to ask for help more, or they actually truly do need help right now rather than they thought before, or they maybe didn't even need help before all this. And so I just think people are more open to help right now. So, which if you're in the helping professions, or
Mhm.
you have the mindset of help and
Right.
kind of that servant leadership, as always, I got to take my own advice and make sure you fill your own tank first.
Mhm.
Um, but the kind of the servant leadership and helping people, as much as it's exhausting, it is also very energizing. So.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it too, because I think it's I've largely I went into this kind of feeling like, okay, yeah, ready, like let's do this. Like I know this is going to be hard and awful or whatever. And it's interesting because I'm doing telehealth with my therapist, which I was telling Doug about in the beginning too, which is a very different experience. But she one of the things that we talked about last week was she's like, she's like, yeah, you do great in a crisis. That she's like, that is what she's like, you do really well in a crisis. She's like, but what you don't do is shut yourself off in a crisis. And I was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. um, and so it is, and I think that's just it. It's like there's an opportunity to really help people here. And people who maybe were not as comfortable asking for it at this point, kind of have been thrust into a place where they just need it. And so it's in that sense it's an opportunity. But then what you also said there I think is really important, which is talking about filling your own cup too, which is something that I think has gotten a little bit harder here. And so what are some of the ways, Doug, that you've been able to kind of, yeah, to fill your own cup, if we use that, in the situation as it is right now?
Um, for me, I would say filling my own cup normally would be things like the reading and the writing and the meditation, and the workouts. And those right now aren't happening as much. What I am finding, Kim and I were speaking before recording, I'm pretty fortunate that even in midst of chaos, sleep is still very strong for me. I can think of, this being probably one of 5 to 10 big kind of crisis moments in my life. Like I think back to when I lost, my parents.
Mhm.
I was very stressed and very emotionally navigating a lot emotionally, obviously, but I don't ever remember like being up in the middle of the night because I lost a parent. I mean, during the day when I'm kind of coping with it, of course, there's a lot of stress, but I've been pretty fortunate in the sense of the way I respond to crisis or stress is not staying up all night. So I would say, without even probably being as much aware about it, I once the day gets going, I build up a lot of stress and a lot of tension. But I wake up feeling, until I start to think about everything and realize this, as we said, realize this is not a nightmare. When I wake up, I generally am waking up after 7 or 8 hours of sleep. So I
Yeah.
would say sleep is number one for how I'm keeping my tank full. And then I'm still reading and I'm still writing, just not at the depth that I would like. But that I would say, even things like I've noticed the days, and I mentioned this I think last week, the days where I don't even take 5 minutes to sit down in the morning and read. That is like, I used to carve out 45 to 60 minutes to read, and right now that's just not realistic. But even like this morning, 5-10 minutes, a couple pages in the book, and that kind of starts my day with a cup of coffee. And that for me is crucial. And I've said this before, you can tie the days of higher stress and higher frustration to even things like reading 2 pages in a book. For me,
Mhm.
is very kind of fill the tank. And then the last thing I would say that's working really, really well is one-to-one conversations with kind of your people, I guess,
Mhm.
is kind of a blanket term, right? So Kim and I, before every podcast, we always, chat for 5 or 10 minutes before we hit record. I speak, a lot of Pat, who's kind of one of my mentors in the industry. Speak with him quite a bit right now, and just other people, a lot of business owners right now, just having conversations and kind of learning that we're all going through this together. So
Mhm.
for me, I get energized and kind of fill my own tank when I strategize and talk through kind of not so much groups of people. I know some people get energized by groups, and I certainly do, but it doesn't probably fill my tank. It's energizing, but it probably more drains my tank than fills it. Like
Mhm.
if that makes sense. It's energizing. I love it, but it empties my tank compared to one-on-one conversation. I would say that I actually leave that conversation with a full tank or a fuller tank.
Yeah,
So
right.
what about
Well,
you?
well, what I love what you said here is, before I answer that, um, what I appreciate you're saying right there, and to tie this to the conversation that we want to have about motivation, is that we're in a place right now where I think you really have to identify uh, I made the note of sort of domino habit, which for you is reading.
Mhm.
And domino habit probably isn't the right thing, but essentially right now it's more important than ever to be able to identify what's that one or those one or two things that if you do it, you're kind of setting yourself up to feel a little bit better. Because as important as that was 6 months ago, that's crucial now. It might not look exactly the same,
Mhm.
but for you knowing exactly for you knowing how important that is to set the tone of your day is I think crucial, because that's also one of the ways that you can continue to make yourself, motivated. And the other thing that you said there, which I think is really important, and I think it's also has been true for me, it's to lean on your resources a little bit more.
Mhm.
And of course, this is an opportunity for helpers to help, I think, a little bit more. But they're also, you need to make sure that you are essentially that you're asking for what you need. And that's really, really hard for a lot of us
Mhm.
under the best of circumstances. But it's just become more crucial than ever to do that. And so I would, I'd say for me too, that one of the things that has happened during this situation that I'm very grateful for is that my workouts are much more on track than what they have been. Because of the way we were, leading some of the workouts, we're doing them virtually. So as coaches, we're doing the workouts as we're coaching. And it was great, because the first time I was like, I can't do 45 seconds of a pledge plank. I can't even believe we programmed this. And then 3 weeks later, I was like, oh, okay, I can do this now.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that my workouts, I'm able to do those a little bit more, but I definitely have had to lean a little bit more on some of those resources. People that I know can kind of fill my tank a little bit, and not be shy about that. Because again, we're finding for a lot of folks that it's hard for them to stay motivated or to get any kind of motivation. And of course, for us, those conversations are largely around nutrition and around, fitness. But it's you now more than ever, I think, need to have a sense of how you work, and what has motivated you in the past,
Mhm.
and then try to get a sense of how you can make that work for the situation we're in, which is the other part of this conversation that's different from talking about just motivation. Is now what we're trying to talk about is how do you stay motivated given the circumstances for what it is. It's that whole do what you can with what you have with where you are. There's no ideal world right now. The ideal world is that you leave and go to the gym, whenever you want to get a workout in. The ideal world is that you can go to the grocery store to get whatever groceries you want and get fresh food and get, fresh vegetables and all that stuff. And some of those, I think what I'm also hearing from clients as we kind of slide into the motivation part of it is okay, this was the routine that I had prior to being quarantined. And now that routine can't exist in this quarantine because I'm working from home, because my kids are home, because my spouse is home. So whereas I used to work out at 4 o'clock every day, that doesn't work in this situation. And now I don't know how to essentially kind of start over and build a new routine. In part also because I'm just so incredibly stressed that it's just hard for me to motivate. Like right now, we're all in crisis mode and we're all in survival mode. And so of course motivation is going to be a little bit harder, but so for us as coaches, we're trying to help people figure out like, okay, let's have this conversation here and see what's going to, be most helpful to you to try to build a new routine, which I think we talked about. We talked about
Yeah.
that I'm looking at it here. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, trying to build a new routine. But I think that the understanding that you need to build a routine is also probably really helpful in terms of trying to figure out what is going to help motivate you, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The two things there that I would kind of hit home and paint a clear picture on as far as, action items or strategies would be really putting some clarity to that domino effect.
Yeah.
Because I think that's huge. And so for clarity, that the domino effect, if you line up a bunch of dominoes, you hit the first one and then the rest of them kind of follow suit. What I think I'm very guilty of, and I think probably all of us are to some degree, is not remembering that in general, right? So not remembering that, one thing can have this cascade. Like in theory, when we hear it, like, yeah, sure. But then in practice, in daily activity, we kind of forget about it. And then the other mistake I see with the domino effect is thinking that first domino has to be this big grand thing, right? And so if you picture a set of dominoes lined up, that first one can be the smallest thing ever, and the dominoes could get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as they go on. But as long as that first one falls and knocks over the second one, the rest of them are going to follow suit. And so I think, again, for me, it would be the example of, reading 1 or 2 pages in the book. It's nothing. It takes me 30 or 45 seconds. But what it does do is it does allow me to have the discipline to get up before the kids get up, to have that moment of peace and quiet where it's just me downstairs with a hot cup of coffee and read 2 pages before Caden comes screaming down the stairs. But in that 30 seconds, in that 40 seconds, in that, 2-3 minutes, like it's not much. But in that then has that, okay, now I'm not, greeting my son with, hey, why are you up so early? Instead of, hey, good morning, buddy. How you doing? You're not greeting people out of aggression. You're greeting people with kindness. You're not, then annoyed when your spouse gets up. You're not then annoyed as you go into your work, whatever it may be, into your day, compared to if, for example, if, the parents all know this, if you are sleeping and all of a sudden your bedroom door opens up and your toddler's jumping on your bed.
I just want to say, I can't even imagine.
That may or may not have happened this morning.
I
so
can't
now
imagine.
it's like, okay, it's 5 o'clock in the morning and you're jumping on my bed right now. But so that day you might have to identify a different domino. Mm-hmm. So, you know what I mean? I just think we talk a lot about building your toolbox, whether we talk about, for you personally, or when you're as coaches, we talk a lot about your toolbox as a coach. And part of your toolbox should be, 1, 2, 3, 4 things that are your domino effect to start your day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was one thing that I wanted to kind of drive home. And then the other thing that I heard there was, and I've talked a lot about this, which is not copying and pasting expectations, right? So you mentioned a lot of clients have had this routine. They were jiving kind of pre-pandemic, and then pandemic hit and that all went out the window. And I think a lot of the frustration is we're trying to look at what our expectations and what our routine was pre-pandemic and trying to copy and paste that into the current environment. Mm-hmm. And that just doesn't happen. I was talking with a gym owner yesterday, and he had just joined my program about a month ago, right before this all started. He had just joined. Wow. And he had his staff set, everything was good. He finally felt like he was in a place where he could work on some of his back end and tighten up his behind the scenes on his business. And we were diving into it, and then boom, pandemic hits. He's got now he's coaching a bunch. He's got his staff all working from home. It's just complete chaos. Mm-hmm. And so we were talking yesterday about this same thing. His expectations right now for his business, it cannot be, in his daily routine and his thing. Every part of his life cannot be the same as what his expectation of what an ideal day would look like. It mm-hmm. just can't be the same, from 4 weeks ago. So I think that's very rational to hear, but mm-hmm. it's harder. I mean, obviously the harder part is, mentally, emotionally, how do you navigate the frustration that is then caused by, the example of, I used to work out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and now I can't because my kids are home, my spouse is home, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And just, giving yourself a little bit of kindness and a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of leeway in that, your expectations for yourself right now are going to look a lot different, and
Yeah.
not copying and pasting them.
Well, and what I love about what you said there is that before you said that, I made a note. Expectations was what I wrote down. So, way to take it and run. That's good, man. So I actually, to build on that a little bit, I am taking a life coaching course because I definitely fall into that category of people that was like, all right, I'm going to make the most of this. We got this time. Like, I'm going to just, and just to be clear, I've adjusted my expectations since then to kind of just factor in reality. But in this course, I'm going to read this quote, which I thought was fantastic. So the life coaching course starts by talking about expectations. And the quote is that it's our expectations that hurt us, not reality. Whatever happens in actuality is real, but what we think should happen in the world is unreal. So people are hurt by their expectations. We're not disappointed by what we find. We are only ever disappointed when our expectations don't become reality. And that quote is from a book that I am not familiar with called The Skilled Helper by George Egan. And so, yeah, everything that you just said there is essentially what is just such a big part of, I think, also understanding your motivation too, because if you are expecting more of yourself than what is really reasonable right now, and I feel like that's one of the conversations that or a big part of the conversations I'm having with a lot of clients is like, let's talk about what's reasonable right now. And what does it even mean to say reasonable? It's like, okay, well, what is, again, given the situation for what it is, like, let's talk about what's reasonable. And then let's reevaluate your goals too, which is a big part of that conversation. So it's like, and I think when you say reevaluate your goals, I think it's even at this point, like, if not day to day, still week to week. Because when we first sort of went into this quarantine, it was like, all right, this may be going to last 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Okay, now we hear April 30th, so we're kind of into that. But now that we're 15 days away from April 30th, we're like, okay, probably going to be a little bit longer. So so you're going to have to really reevaluate your goals. And so then my question for clients all along has been like, okay, kind of where do you want to be on the other side of this situation? And I think that, I don't know about some of the conversations that you're having, Doug, because you're having them with gym owners, but for a lot of people, they're like, you know what, my goal is just to maintain. Now that might be maintain weight. That might be maintain a semblance of a routine, right? But I think that the most helpful thing you can do for yourself as it relates to motivation is to try to reevaluate your goals and get some clarity around where you want to be when life returns to a semblance of normal, I think.
Yeah. A lot of you will be familiar with the SMART acronym, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about goals. So we talk about specific, measurable. The A and the R, I think, are the most important here. And the A is attainable and realistic, right? So it's certainly helpful for things to be specific right now. The more specific, the better. That's always true. But it's also challenging right now to be specific because a lot of times you don't know what you want right now. Measurable, of course, finding a way to measure what the goal is, whether that be in, tracking your workouts or, I know there's a lot of financial goals right now happening as far as, navigating dips in the market and all that stuff. So job losses, adjusting budgets for job losses and things like that. So making sure you have some measurements, but I would say what we're really talking about here is the A and the R. Mm-hmm. Which is attainable and realistic. Right. And because what was attainable and realistic a month ago is not attainable and realistic right now. Mm-hmm. That same gym owner that I referenced earlier about where he was, kind of all ready to go. And then this hit, he was on pace this year to do about 25% more in growth than he was last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously, got wiped out and not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is his attainable and realistic goal is looking a lot different. So attainable and realistic for a lot of us might, to, as you said, Kim, might be, and I think probably you are like crushing it right now if you come out of this how you went into it, whether that be in maintaining your weight, in maintaining your finances, in maintaining your sanity, in maintaining your business. It doesn't really matter what area you're talking about. I would say, we talk a lot about around the holidays in the fitness industry, we talk a lot about maintain, don't gain,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, to put holidays to it, if you can maintain during that duration of the year because of everything going on socially and kind of, all the opportunities that are available during that time, if you can maintain your fitness and your nutrition, you are like crushing it during that time frame. And I would say this time frame is very similar, where if you can maintain, so if budgetary, if you change your budget right now and you can maintain your same income, your same savings, your same financial situation as you're not going to get a massive return right now. It's just not possible. If you have a business, you're not probably going to grow 25% this quarter. It's just not, unless you're in a industry that is solving the pandemic, i.e. you're selling masks and gloves and sanitizer and ventilators, then you're not going to have this massive growth. For most of us, if we just maintain, we are winning, and even that will be a challenge, right? And it's the same thing with of course, kind of your overall, we say fitness, but I would just say overall wellness, right? If you think back of how you were, when you first started, mentally, physically, emotionally, you're kind of, as we said earlier, you're kind of riding those waves right now. But if you come out of this even just kind of a step or two behind or kind of right level with where you're at, you don't have that expectation that you're going to lose 20 pounds during the pandemic.
Right.
If you can just maintain, you're great. Same thing with nutrition. If you can just find those one or two habits that you had and try to maintain those habits, you're just crushing it, So I think that's important when we look at motivation is motivation and goal setting, because they go kind of hand in hand, is you're going to be motivated right now if you set attainable and realistic goals, right? If you set a goal right now that is just super unrealistic, then it's just you're just gonna continue to get frustrated. But setting one that is attainable and realistic, and that's going to look, as we said, that's going to look a lot different right now, then that generally will help with your motivation.
Yeah, and one of the questions that we have used as a company before, that I have been using a lot with clients recently, is what does it look like if it's easy? And so that's in regards to workouts specifically. By that, I mean, like, you want to make something, to your point about the SMART goals, like as doable as possible. And so it's like, okay, what does your workout look like? What does it look like if it's easy? And but by that, I mean, like, okay, let's make it as, reduce the friction, right? Like, so if you're struggling with motivation, and you have a maybe not very specific goal about you're like, okay, I'm going to try to work out 3 times a week. Well, first of all, I'm definitely wishy-washy with language. So I understand that I'm not very direct. I'm going to try to do it. But that's also one of those places where you really have to take that word out. You're not going to try to get 3 workouts in. You're going to get 3 workouts in. But you have to be honest with yourself about what's going to make that doable, because it might be, all right, I can get 3 10-minute workouts in this week. That's very different than saying, like, okay, I'm going to try to get 3 1-hour workouts in this week, because it's not quite, it's just not quite as realistic. And I think that's just continues to be one of those places where you essentially just have to find ways to continue to adjust. And I had another thing I was going to say there, but I lost my train of thought. So
all good. It's all good.
But
I think the hard part if we go back to that SMART acronym, is timely right now is just a giant question mark, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at that SMART acronym, and we know that with goal setting and motivation, if we set a really, quote, smart goal, that we're generally going to be very motivated to obtain it. And so the more specific, the better. So what Kim was saying there was, instead of just saying workout 3 times a week, you're going to do 3 10-minute workouts. That's specific. That's also measurable. I can measure the time. That's probably attainable and realistic. Now, when we look at some of the other goals that you might have, timely, unfortunately, which is probably why it can be challenging right now, everything's still in question as far as when is this going to be over? When are we going to return to normal? What does normal look like? Timely for each of us looks different, right? That depends on where you're living in the country. It depends on what type of job you have. And it depends on everything, right? So timely is when we look at the final kind of piece of the SMART goal and staying motivated towards your goals. I think that's probably the most frustrating one, because you really can't put a time frame to it, and you kind of just, like what we've said as a company, which is we're going to take this thing week by week. Like we know next week we're going to be in it, and we'll wait and see how the week after that looks, and we'll take it week by week. And so I think for personal goals and for personal kind of objectives right now, that's probably true as well. And like if you're listening in Maine has closed schools for the rest of the year. So timely that you're probably going to have, now whether you go back to work or whether things start to open up before then is still obviously in question. But that the kids are going to be homeschooled through the rest of the year. So that at least helps with the timely piece of maybe setting a routine with certain things. But just to hit all kind of 5 there with the SMART acronym, timely, I would say, is what is making it a little bit more stressful, because we can't say, hey, in 3 months we're going to be here, because we just don't know.
Right. And as you were talking, my point came back to me. So thank you. And that was for you to make decisions about when you were going to do. So I'll stick with the workout there. But so you essentially, Doug, made the decision about, in terms of reading, you adjusted your expectations of it, which was to get at least 5 minutes in. But you're making the decision about when you want to do that. And I think one of the places that people are really struggling in terms of motivation is it's back to that routine thing. You're like, if you're like, I'm going to get, 3 10-minute workouts in at some point this week, that's probably still a little too vague, because you're now left to the moment. And of course, we know willpower is finite. You're making probably a lot more decisions in a very different way. And so you've got that decision fatigue. And so whereas, you might be thinking, all right, I'm going to try to get a workout in after I'm done working on Wednesday. That's probably a little bit too vague. And then you still have to decide in the moment to do it or not do it. Whereas if you have the workout on your schedule, so one of the things I've been doing in a lot of one-on-one meetings with clients, and actually I had one woman do this, and her husband, I was overhearing, and he was laughing because, she's an older, very established, professional. And I'm sitting there going like, yeah, pull up your calendar. Okay, now what time? What time Tuesday? What time Wednesday? What time Thursday? And we literally went day by day by day. She made the decision in the conversation with me about when she was going to do it. She made the decision also about what that workout was going to be. So there was no grayness to like, I'm going to try to do this at some point. And that worked for her. That ended up being, when we checked in the following week, she was like, nope, I hit all of them. And I think a large part of that was that we together made those decisions, and that took any kind of the guesswork out for her. And I'm all about wishy-washy. I am not a systems girl. It's not my thing, typically. But I got to tell you, it's my thing right now. That is certainly, that's become important to me to be able to stay on track. And so try to make those, if you're struggling with motivation, try to make those decisions, with a coach or with somebody who can help you there, but make them early in the week.
I think that a lot of us right now have what we call decision fatigue, right? Yeah. So I was on a call yesterday with about 20 business owners here locally, and we were just kind of navigating how everybody's doing and trying to help each other out and give some strategies. And one of the business owners chimed in where he was basically like, I am just so washed by the end of the day that I can't. It was largely talking. The theme was kind of around innovation. How can you innovate right now in business? And he was basically kind of venting, where it was like, okay, by the end of the day, I am so kind of nose to the grindstone that I I'm so washed. I've made so many decisions. I've done so much communication. I've talked to so many people that I can't even think about innovating, right? And it was very fair and taken point. So in regards to motivation, we know, as Kim alluded to, willpower is finite, and we know we have decision fatigue. And so when you're looking at things that you are wanting to do, but you're getting frustrated because they're not getting done, oftentimes, if you look at those things, working out being a great example, you you have to make the decision in the moment, and you didn't make it prior to. Versus, in comparison, if you make it prior to, saying, hey, on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, I'm going to do a workout, you've now made that decision, and you don't have to like wake up on Wednesday and say, hey, what time am I going to work out today? So it sounds very easy and very simple, but what you're doing there, and you can do this, time and time with every facet of your life, which is try to make those decisions earlier. Try to make those decisions when you're fresh, because when you're doing that activity, you might not be fresh. Like if you're working out, we're recording this in context for about almost 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. You might be fresh right now, and so you make the decision to work out today at 3 o'clock. Versus today at 3 o'clock, now you have 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of decisions that you've made. The last thing you're going to want to do is make a decision to work out. But if you made that either earlier on in the day or a previous day, then you're going to be a lot better off.
Yep, absolutely. Champ is just saying hello there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mute myself, but I was like,
No,
you know what? This is just a podcast from home.
This is reality.
This is reality right now. It's like, that video, you remember that video a couple months, or maybe even a year ago, there was this super formal, I think he was like a politician or a reporter, or he was like on like some major network doing an interview. And like his kid came like screaming into his office, and his wife comes screaming in behind and pulls the kid out. And luckily Megan's downstairs. I can hear her screaming at the kids. She's taking care of the kids, but we have this third kid called a dog that likes to bark at, literally the wind blows and he barks. I mean, he's an awesome dog, but he's a barker.
Just letting himself be heard. That's all right. That's all right. So there's one more thing I want to mention before we kind of wrap up here in terms of motivation. And that is reconnecting with your why. So obviously I'm sure we've done episodes on that. Of course, the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek, if you haven't read it, it's an excellent read no matter what. But reconnecting with your why in terms of, so again, fitness is there. Obviously, fitness and nutrition is kind of top of mind. But reconnecting with your why in so much is that your why right now might be a little bit different than what it was, a month and a half ago. And so for you to sit down, and again, we're talking about, you're reevaluating your goals, reevaluating hopefully your expectations for yourself. But still within that, it's really important to have some clarity for yourself about why it is that you want to, do X, Y, or Z, whatever that might be. And so this is a good time, I think, to, grab a piece of paper, put, a journal. I know there's some people right now that are journaling, which I think, Doug, are you doing the COVID-19 kind of journal? We talked about that.
Yeah, that was a strategy that right when this first started, it was more of a business strategy. I don't really use it much on the personal front, but it was a business strategy. I mean, in theory, it's all the same, but it's the idea of basically having a separate notebook for this kind of pandemic and all the lessons that you've learned. And it's been very fascinating. I'll tell you, my personal lesson is, as Kim knows, I'm a systems and process and operations kind of guy, and that's generally my strong suit. And it is amazing right now what I thought was so organized and so clear, when in crisis it basically fell apart. Not everything, but certain processes, certain operations, certain systems. It goes to show you that you change one piece of it, i.e., to use a concrete example, we have a lot of processes in place for our team, but then when they're all working virtually, none of those take place. And so it goes to show you that, okay, now you need one for long term, I was like, okay, what does this look like if we have to deal with this in 10 years again and everybody's got to work from home again?
Mm-hmm.
Now we can have a plan, and now we can have some kind of there's still going to be kind of the whole ready fire aim approach, right? But yeah, I think that was that journal's been cool. I think it'll be cooler looking back at it, right? Like anything else,
Oh yes, but if you haven't, I just think spending a little time, if that's your thing. Not everybody likes to write, but I think being if you have the time and space to get a little bit reflective, then that's also one of those places where try to reconnect with your why, and if you can find a way to do that, or have somebody kind of talk you through that, because that's the other thing is that I think for a lot of people, as also I'm learning, of course, in this life coaching course, is that you and I have done podcasts on self-reflection, and kind of self-introspection, and some people that comes very natural to, and I understand some people a little bit less so. So you might not feel comfortable sitting down and trying to tackle that on your own, with just a piece of paper, but you might be okay to have a conversation with somebody as you try to puzzle through, like, okay, what is my why behind some of these goals that I have right now? So anyway, that was just a couple. We hit, I think the big ones there that we kind of hit on, which is one of which is lean on your resources more, kind of ask for what you need, which is not easy, but this is a time to do that. Try to identify your domino action. I'll say not even habit, but action. Like, try to identify that one thing that is going to fill your cup maybe a little bit more than others. Revisit the SMART goals: small, measurable, attainable. What was the other one?
Realistic and timely.
I don't know why I always forget the last two. And then I think the other big one that we talked about there was just adjusting your expectations for the circumstances, and then reconnect with your whys. So yeah.
And I think for those that are readers, a book that I'm revisiting, if you're a reader, Start with Why is a phenomenal book, as Kim alluded to. But a lot of people, if you connect with the author, Simon, I'm on a first name basis with him. I've never met the guy. Kim has.
This guy.
But his previous book, I think, is very relevant right now, especially if you're in the helping professions / in a leadership role. And that doesn't mean your title is a leader. That means you're taking a leadership role, whether that be at home or in work, which is Leaders Eat Last. Leaders Eat Last is a phenomenal book. Leaders Eat Last. And so it's, I'm revisiting those lessons because it's a great reminder right now when you are continually frustrated, with whether it be your personal goals or just life in general. But Leaders Eat Last is another great read, specifically probably a lot of more professional context, but like anything, you can apply it personally. So
awesome. I made a note here to link those two books by Simon Sinek into the to link those in the show notes, actually. So I wonder if you can hear my dog's nails. Rooney just woke up, so he's just clicking his way out of the office here where we're at. So, but anything else you want to throw out there, Doug, for anybody who's listening?
Nope. I think we're just plugging along. We are planning. We're going to solidify a date. Actually, Kim and I are hopping onto our team huddle here in a minute. We're going to solidify a date for our virtual charity workout. I'm going to be proposing. I would say if you are following our stuff, just stay in tune with our Facebook and email. Facebook being the best one. That link will be there, and there'll be a virtual charity workout where you can donate and all that stuff. So super cool event coming up, and we'll have more information later. As Caden runs up into my office, wondering where Megan is. Awesome. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Happy working from home.
Have a great one.
See ya.
Oh, hang on. I got to find my mouse. Where's my mouse? All right.
Caden, what are you doing?